Hello everyone, I'm Tom Lembong, Chairman of the Indonesia Investment Coordinating Board. Honorable Consuls General in Sydney, Melbourne, and Perth, Pak Heru Subolo, Ibu Spika Tutu Hatonewa, and Ibu Dewi Tobing, dear colleagues from Bahar and partners, particularly my old friend and colleague, Mr. Yon Bahar, and from Pinsent Masons. So first, a special thanks to Bahar Law Firm and Pinsent Masons for organizing these roundtable discussions in 3 different cities around Australia. And a special thanks also to AIBC, the Australian Indonesia Business Council, for your support in organizing these discussions. Thank you also for allowing me to share some thoughts and updates over this video. Sadly, I'm not able to travel to Australia at this time to attend in person. Now, what a lot of people are keen to hear from me is my latest thoughts on the Indonesia-Australia trade agreement that we have just signed between our 2 countries, the CEPA, Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. How will this impact business between our 2 countries? What's new? What do I foresee is going to happen next? Look, do these trade agreements actually make a difference? I believe they do. Couple of perspectives. First, I think these trade agreements, and certainly this CEPA between these 2 countries, I think is a reflection of the times. It's a reflection of this moment in time and the unique chemistry between the leaderships between the 2 countries, right? I even failed to realize until somebody pointed this out to me. It's pretty remarkable that Australia and Indonesia would sign a free trade agreement when both countries are mere weeks from elections in both countries. And remarkably, nobody has raised a ruckus or chosen to weaponize this trade agreement. Neither country's opposition is up in arms over us signing this cooperation agreement between the 2 countries, for example. Try to remember 12 years ago or 7 years ago, or for that matter, even 4 or 5 years ago, the very prickly and fragile relations between our 2 countries with so many sensitivities and the occasional outbreak of diplomatic hostilities, because of one controversy or another. So I think the signing of this CEPA by itself, weeks from elections in both countries, reflects how cooled down, how calm, how constructive, frankly, the relations are these days between the 2 governments. And I believe, regardless what is the outcome of the elections in both countries, this trend is here to stay. We're going to see much warmer, much calmer, much more conducive relations and much fewer kind of outbreaks of diplomatic freeze or clashes than we have seen in the past. The second thing is like this. When 2 governments sign trade agreements like this, it really focuses the mind in both governments on allocating resources and time and effort to the partner country. So the CEPA is a strong signal to all ministries and departments, agencies, and also local governments at the provincial, district, and city level, that Australia is a major new focus for all of us, right? Yes, in terms of the legalities, the CEPA contains provisions, contains text around trade in goods, trade in services, e-commerce, competition policy, finance, and so on, which will give better legal protections for trade, tourism, and investment between the two countries, absolutely. So it does give more legal certainty, it does give more protections for the traffic between our two countries. But really, trade agreements like this are as much a political statement as they are a legal document. So again, I think the CEPA bodes very, very well for the next few years between our two countries. When Trade Minister Steve Chiobo and I, as Trade Minister of Indonesia at the time, launched the CEPA in Canberra in the spring, Northern Hemisphere spring of 2016. I used two words to characterize my vision for this trade agreement and for the relations between our two countries after this CEPA. And the two words are powerhouse and fun. Trade agreements tend to get bogged down in very traditional industries like agricultural and cattle and manufactured goods, when in reality 60 to 70% of our economies are actually in the services sector, right? Services like tourism, media, entertainment, finance, property, real estate, banking, you name it, right? I think the powerhouse concept is pretty intuitive, right? These two gigantic countries, one a maritime giant, Indonesia, one a land mass, Australia, right adjacent to each other. If we could truly join up together, and our two economies are so complementary, if we could join up together to jointly capitalize on the opportunities around ASEAN and the Asia Pacific, I sincerely believe we would be unstoppable. And again, sorry to repeat, but I think the complementarity between Australia and Indonesia are just staggering, right? Australia with its sophisticated service sector, including the law firms and the investment banks, the accounting firms and consultants, and Indonesia with the large population, the natural resources and what have you. Our two countries are just so complementary, and again, our hope is that the CEPA drives more collaboration, more partnerships, not just in each other, but looking at things in third countries and third regions like ASEAN, the Asia Pacific together, right? Now, fun is the other word, operative word here that I use. And again, I think this new chapter in our collaborations will be much more sustainable and snowball over time if we can really make it fun and attractive for our respective peoples, particularly the young, right? And why bother doing anything or putting a lot of effort into anything if it's not fun? And I believe, especially young people would think that way. But of course, old people do too. Hence, to me, the perfect example is tourism and lifestyle, right? Fun and powerhouse, and third countries, frankly. Thanks to infrastructure upgrades around Indonesia, we're now enjoying a massive tourism boom. Frankly, the number one source of tourists around the world these days is China, right? We're also seeing sizable construction of resorts, tourism districts, hotels, responding to this massive increase in the international arrivals of tourists. Now look, for building resorts and and tourism districts, I believe we will get more and cheaper capital from countries like China, Korea, and Japan, right? But what we also need is Australia's high value, high expertise, and yes, therefore high cost capital to fill the gap, right? So imagine Australian investors, Australian specialists working with Indonesian developers, Indonesian businesses to bring in Chinese, Korean, and Japanese investment to develop resorts and tourism districts around Indonesia, right? Catering to Chinese, Korean, and Japanese tourists, and eventually also to tourists from India and the Middle East, right? That's the kind of collaboration that I foresee in the years to come. Now look, yes, Indonesia can often be a challenging place to do business. We still have a lot of poorly conceived regulations and misguided policies and legislation. We're certainly not alone in that. If you think Indonesia is complicated, I guess I shouldn't mention names, but there are many, many other developing countries, and for that matter, developed countries, where doing business can face similar uncertainties and difficulties. Think about the huge legal, regulatory uncertainties around Brexit now. I think, lastly, what I want to convey is the Indonesian government's ability to put forward this fairly high quality, high standards trade agreement with Australia. And the next step after this would be a trade agreement with the European Union, which would be massive, right? But what this signifies is that our bureaucracy, our government in Indonesia is also changing, is also evolving, right? We are becoming more open, we are becoming more internationalized, we are becoming more progressive. Now again, you still need good assistance to assist you if you're an investor or an exporter or a tourism operator to navigate the local peculiarities of rules, regulations, and other conditions in Indonesia. And that's another reason why I strongly welcome initiatives by professional services providers like Bahar Law Firm and Pinson Masons to hold roundtables like this. And I certainly encourage you to do this more often, and also over time to develop an online resources for people interested to do business between Indonesia and Australia. So with that, I wish you all a productive discussion, and we look forward to working with you closely in the years to come. Thank you very much.